Some photos were never meant to be found, and some smiles were never meant to return. 13-year-old Caleb was cleaning out the attic of his grandmother's old cabin deep in the Appalachian woods, West Virginia, the same house where he'd camped every summer as a child. Inside a box of old photographs, he found one that made his heart stop. A faded black and white picture of a boy who looked exactly like him. But the boy's eyes were scribbled out in ink, and the smile curved just a little too far, like he was laughing at whoever found him. No one in the family recognized the photo. No one had ever seen that face before. You're about to hear a tale buried somewhere between memory and mirror, where addicts hide more than forgotten things. And sometimes, you were photographed before you were ever born. Part 1. The Boy in the Photo. Caleb first saw the photo on a Saturday afternoon. The attic at his grandmother's house wasn't unusual. Just old boxes, moldy books, rusted lanterns, and a couple of camping tools from his great-grandfather's days. But one wooden box, unmarked, unlabeled, was different. Inside it, wrapped in old brown cloth, was the only thing carefully preserved. A faded black and white photograph smelling faintly of smoke and damp paper. The boy in the photo wore a high-buttoned shirt, hair combed neatly, as if ready for school portraits. But the eyes, they'd been scribbled out with thick black ink, and the smile wasn't quite right. One corner of the mouth curled upward, as if holding back a secret. Caleb didn't feel scared at first, just unsettled, because the boy looked exactly like him, not just similar, but like seeing a childhood picture of yourself you don't remember taking. He brought the photo down to the kitchen. "Grandma, who is this?" His grandmother paused, holding a teacup midair. Her hands trembled ever so slightly. She stared at the photo for a long time before gently pulling it from his hand. "Don't bring that down here," she said. "Last time someone touched that was when Tommy disappeared." Tommy Caleb had never heard that name in the family. His grandmother said nothing more. "Put it back," she warned, "and don't let anyone meet those eyes again." But the eyes were already crossed out, and somehow even blacked out, they still felt like they were staring. The first night. That night, Caleb slept upstairs in the attic, the same room he always stayed in during summer. The old beams groaned under the wind. Fog rolled thick outside the tiny window. Sometime after midnight, he heard footsteps. Soft, measured. From the far corner of the room, the one with the photo box, he flicked on his flashlight. No one. But the photo wasn't in the box anymore. Caleb froze, too afraid to go downstairs. He curled under the blanket, hoping to fall asleep, but just before slipping into sleep, he heard a voice whisper from the corner, "It's not you, I was photographed first." Part 2. The photo doesn't need memory. The next morning, Caleb told his grandma about the dream. He didn't mention the voice, just asked again about Tommy. She sat silent for a moment, then stood up and unlocked a drawer in the bedroom, one he'd never seen open. Inside was a small photo album, thick yellowed pages, no names or dates. Every photo was of boys who looked exactly the same. Same haircut, same eyes scribbled out, same crooked smile as if they knew something others didn't. "Tommy was your cousin. He vanished in 1961, she said. But he wasn't the only one. Every generation, one shows up, always the same face. Then they disappear, always after finding the photo. Caleb's throat went dry. Why does it look like me? Because it doesn't need to be you. It's the memory of the attic itself. He skipped lunch, returned to the attic, searched through the old boxes, and this time he found not just one photo. There were 3. Still the same boy, but in different poses. One sitting, one standing near the window, one staring directly ahead like looking into a mirror. Caleb's chest tightened. This attic isn't just storing objects, it's organizing memory. The mirror doesn't reflect. That second night, sleep didn't come. Around 2 a.m., Caleb turned on his flashlight and pointed it at the old mirror in the room. No reflection, not his, but a boy standing behind him. He spun around, nothing, looked back, gone, but his hand felt cold, like someone had just held it from behind. Footsteps again, slower this time, from the far corner past the old bookshelf right behind him. He didn't turn. He just whispered, "Who are you?" And a low laugh spilled out, twisted, strained, like caught you in the throat. "I'm you, but you weren't the first one to live." Part 3. The boy who got photographed first. Caleb didn't sleep at all. By morning he tore through the attic like a storm, and the deeper he went, the worse it got. A child's glove, only the left one. A comb with strands of black hair. A note handwritten in Caleb's exact handwriting. "You shouldn't have opened the box. I've slept long enough. Now it's my turn to be photographed." He ran downstairs to show his grandma. She looked at the letter, eyes wet. Not everyone who finds the photo disappears. Only those who dare look into its eyes. Caleb shouted, but the eyes were scribbled out. She gripped his shoulder, whispering, "The ink is for others. The real eyes are in the mirror." The mirror door. That night, Caleb placed every photo he'd found in front of the mirror. 1, then 2, then 6. They began to form a circle. The mirror trembled. His own reflection vanished, replaced by the boy in the photo, beginning to move. The boy sat up, stood, took a step forward, and reached out of the mirror. Caleb froze. His hands shook. Behind him, his own reflection was fading. The boy didn't need to exist with Caleb. He just needed to replace him. And suddenly Caleb understood every generation had its Caleb. Each born through the attic, each erased when the photo was found. But this time the boy didn't want a memory. He wanted the whole body. Caleb ripped the final photo in half. Black ink sprayed from the edges like blood from a smiling mouth. He grabbed the old lantern and smashed the mirror. The photo burned. The mirror shattered. Nothing left to reflect. Next morning, his grandmother climbed into the attic. Scorched edges, broken glass, except for one thing still intact. A new photograph. Caleb smiling directly at the lens. This time, the eyes were untouched, written on the back. "Now it's my turn to be real. Found." Photo, extended story, part 1, a face without a name. After the mirror shattered, Caleb noticed something strange. He was still alive, still breathing, but nothing reflected him anymore. Not the car window, not the black TV screen, not even the water in the sink. The world had stopped mirroring him. As days passed, Caleb felt something worse than fear, mismatch. His room felt smaller. His handwriting started to curve differently. His mother's voice on the phone called a name that wasn't quite his. 1 week later, his grandmother climbed the attic. Everything was still except for a single photo left in the dust. Caleb facing the window, not turning around. On the back, in trembling ink, "I was never named, but I've always been here." Part 2. The children who looked the same. The house was abandoned for a decade. Locals called it the quiet attic. No one stepped in. Until a new family, the Porters, moved in. Their 11-year-old son, Ethan, found a photo box while playing hide and seek. One picture showed a boy who looked exactly like him, except wearing a cap Ethan had never owned. He showed his parents. They didn't recognize the boy. That night, Ethan dreamed of taking a photo of himself. Each morning, a new photo appeared under his pillow. No one knew how it got there. One day, after a tantrum, Ethan screamed, "I'm not Ethan, I'm the one who got photographed first." Then sobbed, and couldn't explain why he'd said it. Part 3. Memories that don't belong to anyone. The attic changed. Anyone who slept there started confusing memories. A girl named Hazel dreamed of taking a math test in someone else's handwriting. A father named Daniel cried at night, saying he remembered being sung to by a mother who wasn't his. Photos started showing up in frameless glass. Whoever looked in The face inside the photo shifted. Looks like you. Wait, that's me. Why don't I remember taking this? Locals began to whisper, the attic doesn't keep photos, it keeps faces that were never called. Each time someone forgets something important, the attic remembers it for them, and then prints a face. Part 4. Stolen Self. Reed, a teenager recovering from depression, stayed in the house, now a guest lodge. He had no idea about the rumors, until one day his journal changed handwriting. He found a childhood photo of himself in a jacket that never existed. I don't remember being the boy in the photo, but I remember how it felt to be photographed. Reed began to lose sleep. Each night his reflection grew fainter. Then one night, a voice from the mirror spoke. It's my turn now, you've lived long enough. Then it laughed. Part 5. The First Photographer. They started calling it the one who took the first photo. No face, no name, but everyone might have been it once. Only difference they forgot. The last photo found in the house was a group picture. Every face was the same. Different smiles, different angles, but one face. No one knows who took it, no one remembers being there. On the back it said, if you see yourself in this photo, you've never really been you. The archivist, the one who remembers wrong word count 2000. Naturally embedded keywords found, photo true horror stories, creepy attic doppelganger, weird childhood memory. Part 1. The last one who remembers her name. Her name used to be Marion, but no one called her that anymore. In the family records, her name was overwritten, crossed out with different pens over generations. Her portrait sat quietly in the attic. Yet she wasn't dead, because she had never been photographed. That's why she remembered everything. She remembered the crossed-out eyes, the recycled smiles, the children sitting in corners whispering, why do I have 2 birthday photos at age 7? They called her the archivist, not because she kept albums, but because the attic kept her. She was a memory without a picture. Part 2. The Photo Out of Time. That year, a young guest arrived, Lena, years old. She found a picture frame with no photo, but when she stared into it, a face appeared, not hers, but a girl who looked just like her playing with a toy that didn't exist yet. Marion arrived too late. How long have you been looking? Did you see anyone else in there? No, but the girl in the photo knew my name. She said, Lena, don't run this time. Part 3. Memory Exchange begins. That night, Lena began to slip. She called her grandma Aunt Rose, recited a phone number no one in the family recognized. She wrote in her diary in cursive, neat, thin, exactly like Marion's writing from childhood. Marion knew the photo wasn't just taking memories, it was trading roles. Lena wasn't being captured, she was becoming the next archivist. If Marion did nothing, Lena would be the one left remembering everything forever. Part 4. The one never photographed. Marion climbed to the attic's highest level, where an old camera had sat untouched for decades. She knew the rule, the unphotographed remember, the photographed fade, the faded become the photo. She had 2 choices, take Lena away before the frame reflected again, or photograph herself so Lena could walk away whole. She held the camera, her hands trembled, the flash blinked for the first time in 87 years. The photo developed. It was Lena, standing alone, smiling, clear-eyed, but at her feet was Marion's shadow, a shadow that had never been captured, now inked into eternity. After that day, Lena forgot the attic. She grew up like any other child. As for Marion, no one spoke her name, no one remembered her. But in the attic, when someone finds an old photo, her silhouette is still there, watching, quietly remembering. And if you look closely enough, the picture might appear blank, but something inside it remembers you first. The reflection that was never me. I'm not sure when I first started doubting myself. Maybe the day my right hand raised slightly slower than my reflections, or earlier when I found that old mirror in the attic of our new rental house. My name is Arlo. I'm 13, and if you're reading this, it might already be too late to save me. The attic smelled like dust and burnt wood. When my mom said, "Pick something cool to decorate your room," I pulled out a large mirror, its wooden frame cracked at the edge, its surface cloudy. I cleaned it, set it by my bed. That night, while brushing my hair, the reflection blinked before I did. I stopped, thought it was just eye strain. A week later, I dreamt I lived in another family. The mother had curly hair, wore a bookstore apron I'd never seen. I called her May. She called me Jamie. The next morning, I found this in my journal. Jamie saw me in the mirror last night. Arlo didn't. I didn't remember writing that. The handwriting was similar, but slightly rounder. I checked my webcam, recorded myself brushing my teeth. In the video, my reflection didn't blink. It just stared and smiled. Wednesday night, the mirror shivered. No wind, no open windows. Then a whisper inside my head. "You're the better reflection. I used to be Marion, then Jamie. Who will you be next?" I slammed the book shut, ran downstairs. My mom blamed horror movies again. But the next morning she asked, "Didn't you love peach pie?" I hate peaches. On my final night of being myself, the mirror widened. Its surface dipped like water. I saw myself, but different. Hair parted left. Eyes knowing things I hadn't said. "Thanks for keeping the spot warm. You were the easiest one to replace." Then it stepped out, and I stayed in the mirror. I screamed. No sound came. I slapped the glass. No one noticed. It, the thing that called itself Arlo, walked into the kitchen, had breakfast, talked like nothing ever happened. I don't feel hunger or thirst, just memory. I remember Jamie, Marion, Caleb, even the ones who never had names. I'm not a reflection anymore. I'm a wrong memory clinging to the mirror. If someone looks closely enough, I can whisper, "You're not anybody. You're just the next one to be seen." I'm not in the mirror anymore, but every mirror in the house still knows my name. One day, the new kid, Liam, looked into the bathroom mirror. I saw him clearly, and when he looked back, I was no longer me. Ever since I was trapped in the reflection, I started remembering things I'd never lived. A birthday party with a 3-layer cake, a dog named Marley I used to play with, a grandfather I've never had. I don't know whose memories they are, but I hold them. And just like Marion once whispered, if someone looks at you long enough, memory follows the gaze. Each night when Liam brushes his teeth, he tilts his head, smirks slightly, exactly like I used to. No one taught him that. I don't have to leave the mirror to change him. I only need to be seen. One night, Liam wrote in his journal. I couldn't read it, but I recognized it. It was my handwriting, the same line I once wrote when I was still Arlo. I dreamed of a hallway full of mirrors. In each one I was there, but each version was a different me. Next morning, he stared into the mirror longer, and he smiled, my old smile, the one I feared most, the smile of the first reflection. His mom asked why he drew 2 Liams, one sleeping, one standing inside the mirror. He didn't answer. He only said, "The one in the mirror wants to live more than the one out here." Since then, Liam started talking to himself. But when he laughed, the sound echoed from the walls. I'm no longer alone. The mirror now holds 2 parallel memories, and one of us wants to get out. I realized it when Liam took a selfie in the mirror. The photo didn't show Liam, it showed me. Not me now, but me when I was still myself. Liam looked at the photo, frowned, then smiled. It remembers your name before you forgot it. From then on, his photos started to change. They shifted with my memories. He saw himself in places he'd never been, holding a stuffed animal I lost at age 8. Car windows, oven glass, black TV screens. Every reflective surface began to hold my image, not his. Soon, his mother said, "You don't look like your passport photo anymore." The school's face scan failed to recognize him. His friends called him the wrong name. He was no longer Liam, and I was no longer just Arlo. We'd merged. No border, no before, no after. But now, in every reflection, only one face remains, the one remembered longest. Final line. If you're reading this on a black screen, look closely at the bottom left. If the face there smiles first, congratulations. You've been chosen to stay. Part 1. I don't know his name, but the system does. I'm a security technician at Stillwater High, and the boy appearing in every hallway camera, he's not one of our students. The first time I saw him, I thought it was a glitch. Footage from Corridor 3B flickered. Then a boy appeared. He didn't look at the camera. He stood by the water cooler, hand resting on the wall mirror, except his shadow fell in the wrong direction. I checked class rosters. No one named Arlo. No teachers recognized him. But footage from the second floor, the fourth floor, even the gym, all showed him. At the same time, I sent the clip to the department's tech team. 8 hours later, they replied, no human face detected in footage. But I looked again. The boy stared right into the lens. I tried deleting the file. It disappeared. Then it reappeared in the system's backup drive. File name found. You Too Late. MP4 Part 2. No one knows his name, but everyone's met him. After that day, anyone who watched the clip started dreaming of childhoods with Arlo in them. A teacher said, I swear I had a classmate named Arlo in 4th grade. Quiet kid. Drew a lot. But my mom swears no one like that ever existed. A student told me I remember playing games with Arlo. He always picked the glitched character, but I checked old photos. He's not in any of them. Photos taken on students' phones, when zoomed in, always showed a boy in the background. Small build, eyes tilted toward the lens, never fully in focus. I began to realize the boy didn't need to exist to be remembered. He just needed someone to have forgotten something. Then our school's facial recognition system glitched. 47 profiles scrambled, every one overwritten with Arlo's face. System log said matched profile, default, ghost 001. I typed Arlo into the database. No result. But when I typed forgotten, one photo appeared. He stood alone, smiling faintly, hand on a cracked mirror. Caption default image for misplaced memories. He no longer needed mirrors. No photos, no name. He just needed you to forget something. And then one night I checked my security feed. No mirrors. But the bottom corner, my face was replaced. Not me. Not anyone else. Just the one I thought I knew long ago. My name is Evelyn Maddox, or it used to be. When I was a child, my mother often called me by the wrong name, a name no one in our family had ever used. She'd laugh nervously. Sorry, sweetie. My brain scrambled today. Why do I keep calling you Arlo? I always thought it was harmless. But at 28, during a sleep cognition test at the lab, I was asked to write my name. I wrote Arlo, without noticing. I work in cognitive tech, studying smart mirrors with behavioral memory integration. One morning I tested a new unit, looked into the mirror. Display read, "Welcome back, Arlo." I froze. The device had never been set to that name. I dug into the logs. The deeper I went, the stranger it got. Every time a user experienced temporary identity, confusion, fatigue, insomnia, dementia, the mirror defaulted to identifying them as Arlo, even stranger. They accepted it. A 74-year-old woman smiled gently when asked her name. I don't quite remember, but the mirror says I'm Arlo, so maybe that's right. I went back to my grandmother's old house, the one I grew up in, back in Stillwater. The attic was dust-choked but familiar. In a warped wooden box, I found a bundle of old black and white photos. Children standing in front of mirrors. Some had their eyes scratched out. Some had no faces at all. I searched each one, looking for me, but Evelyn Maddox wasn't in any of them. Instead, in over 20 photos, I saw the same boy, standing, sitting, smiling, tilting his head, always with one hand on the mirror, Arlo. Then I noticed the mirror in the photos. It was the same one my mother had in her bedroom. I ran downstairs, that mirror still hanging. I looked in, no reflection, but the glass fogged faintly, like breath just left its surface. I touched it, cold. My hand's reflection delayed by 2 seconds. A voice echoed, not sound, but memory. When was the last time you saw yourself? Were you ever called Arlo, or just someone who was never called by their true name? I went back to my grandmother's old house, the one I grew up in, back in Stillwater. The attic was dust-choked but familiar. In a warped wooden box, I found a bundle of old black and white photos. Children standing in front of mirrors. Some had their eyes scratched out. Some had no faces at all. I searched each one, looking for me. But I, Evelyn Maddox, wasn't in any of them. Instead, in over 20 photos, I saw the same boy, standing, sitting, smiling, tilting his head, always with one hand on the mirror. Arlo. Then I noticed the mirror in the photos. It was the same one my mother had in her bedroom. I ran downstairs, that mirror still hanging. I looked in, no reflection, but the glass fogged faintly like breath just left its surface. I touched it, cold. My hand's reflection delayed by 2 seconds. A voice echoed not sound, but memory. When was the last time you saw yourself? Were you ever called Arlo, or just someone who was never called by their true name?